Do you have any loans, like mortgages, student loans, credit cards, auto loans? Well, you're not alone. As of late 2019 and early 2020 in Canada and the United States, statistics show that in Canada, the average debt per person was around $73,500. And when you compare that to the United States, that was closer to $90,000. Now, over the past 5 years, the biggest increases in debt were for Gen Z, which is ages 18 to 23, and for millennials, ages 24 to 39. These age groups' debt grew by 22% and 58% respectively, the largest of any demographic. Now, most people I talk to fall into one or two categories. One, they're either terrified of debt, they don't want anything to do with it, or two, they just don't even care about it and they just buy everything and pile on debt like ketchup on fries. So what I want to talk to you about today is how to use debt effectively. It's how to be cautious and careful with it, but also to leverage it in your advantage when the circumstance is right. Hey, my name's Dan with Craig Capital. Welcome to my channel. Here at Craig Capital, we look at personal finance and life tips to help you grow your money and be successful. Now, before we start, make sure we smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, because it really helps me out, helps my channel, helps me to make more videos for you guys. So with that said, thank you, and let's get started. At the end of the day, debt can be crippling and can ruin your life if you really don't manage it properly, but it can really help you grow your wealth if you know what to do with it. Now, obviously, the best way to manage your debt is to manage your finances properly by looking at your spending and creating a budget that you can work with and stick to. And you've got to know that debt is not just a bad word, it can be a tool that you use to help you grow your wealth. Now, there's lots of different types of debt that we can talk about, from mortgages to student loans to credit cards and credit lines and auto loans and other things like payday loans, which we'll talk about later. Now, if we talk about mortgages are typically larger loans and they have lower interest rates. The lenders can give you a lower interest rate because of the lower perceived risk of that type of investment. These days, mortgage rates are at an all-time low. You can get rates in the 2% range. It's a pretty incredible time for borrowing for mortgages. I'm not sure about you, but pretty much everyone and their dog that I know has bought a new house or moved or something like that this year. And the second largest tranche of debt for consumers would be student loans in North America. And the interest rate on these would typically range from 3 to 5 or 6%. It's all depending on the prime rate, but that's a typical range. Auto loans, they'll range widely. So if you think about you go to buy a car, it depends on if you're buying a new car or a used car or what kind of credit history you have. You can get rates all the way as low as 0% or 0.9%, all the way up to 10+%, depending on what you're buying and, again, your credit. Now, credit cards, which most of us have, typically have a higher interest rate, typically in the 15 to 25% range. And that's because the type of spending that we're using credit cards for is more consumer grade spending. A lot of these things are just consumable goods that go away. Credit lines are also a type of debt. So you can take these out from like a bank, for instance. If you want to buy a car under a credit line, or you want to make an investment in your home, sometimes you can get something called a HELOC, H-E-L-O-C. You might have heard of it. It's a home equity line of credit. The interest rates on credit lines typically range quite a bit as well, from the 3 to 10% range. And then last but not least, the pirates of the modern day, the payday loan, which can see interest rates of upwards of 400% if you really want to be robbed in a legal way. Now, the core of what I want to talk to you about today is a decision-making process around what to do with your money when you have it. So you're given a choice between spending money to pay down your loans or your credit lines or your credit cards or whatever, versus taking some of that money and investing it in the stock market. So for me, I typically use a rule called the 4% rule. Now, the 4% rule says that if you have debt that has an interest rate of 4% or lower, you should typically not prioritize paying down that debt right away. Make the payments that are required, but you don't want to pay a whole lot more than what's required. If the interest rate is above 4%, then you want to prioritize paying that down quicker. The philosophy behind this is that the next best alternative to paying down your debt is actually investing in the stock market. And if we look at the last 50 years of returns in the stock market, average annual return, it's been around 7%. Inflation adjusted. So if I were to give you the choice between making 4% return on your money or 7% return on your money, I think you would choose the 7%, right? You should. The idea here is you want to optimize the money you have. You want to make the most return from the money you have, but in a safe way. That's why the 4% rule is not a 5% or a 6% rule. It's giving you a bit of a buffer or a safety net between the 7% average return of the market, which doesn't happen every year. So sometimes you could have a lower return and sometimes you could have a higher return, and that guaranteed return of 4%. So generally speaking, over the long run, you want to prioritize putting more money into your investments rather than into paying down debt quicker if your interest rate is lower than 4%. Now, if we use credit cards as an example, I was talking to a friend the other day, and they were telling me that they're saving to buy a house, which is really exciting for them. I was really happy. And he was telling me his whole story and maybe a little bit too much detail. And he was saying, okay, we're saving up about $500 a month, which is great considering his income of around $40,000. And he's trying to save, and the bank wasn't giving him a loan, so he needed to save more money. I said, okay, that's good. You're on the right track. And then he started telling me more about his wife's finances and said that his wife, her credit history wasn't so good. And on top of that, he then slid in the fact that he had around $5,000 of credit card debt that he was just sitting on and making the minimum payments on every month. He had $5,000 of credit card debt with a 20% interest rate that he was paying around $85 in interest every single month for, that he could be putting towards saving if he had paid that off. So I explained to him, if he just used that $500 that he had every month to pay down this credit card debt, he'd have it paid off entirely in less than a year, and he'd only have around $500 interest paid. Whereas the strategy that he's using to make the minimum payment to pay his credit card off, that's going to take him a long time, and it's going to cost him over $5,500 in interest before he pays that off. So on $5,000 debt, he's going to pay over $10,000 in net cost to pay that off. Would you rather pay $5,500 to pay it off or $10,000 plus to pay it off? I think I'd take the $5,500 option. Now, if he had just used the 4% rule, he would see that his credit card interest rate is 20%, which is way higher than 4%, and he was prioritizing putting money into savings rather than paying that down. When in reality, what he should have been doing is paying off his credit card as quickly as possible and then starting to save up. This would have two benefits for him, specifically when he's trying to buy a house. One, it reduces the amount of debt that he's using so that the bank is able to give him more debt in the form of a house loan. And two, it gets rid of his interest payments sooner than later and allows him to save more money up front and make more money in the long run from the money he has. So in summary, I hope this helps you today to think about the 4% rule when you're looking at your money and what to do with it, whether it's to pay off loans more or to invest in the stock market or do something else very useful with it. If this video was helpful for you, please give me a like down below, smash that like button, smash it a couple times, turn it on and off if you want, that's great. Hit the subscribe button, just make sure the like button's on when you're done. And then subscribe, hit the notification bell, that way when all my new videos come out, you can be the first one to watch it. I appreciate your time, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.